All right. Hello and welcome to Plugging Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugging Along, we released a patch for MinstrelBuffs that included the Soliloquy of Spirit and Inner Strength Tracker that had been the focus of the stream for so many weeks. And then we started looking at the Opaque Quest Tracker and how to make some improvements to that to make people's life a little bit more better. So today we're going to look at what we did last time, review that real quick, and then we'll walk through adding a little lock icon similar to what you might see in the inventory window to make it a one-click operation to be able to both move and resize the window. And yeah, we'll sort of see what that looks like. As always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. But for now, let me go ahead and make sure everything is going okay. Trying something new, I've resized my stream output to both be a little bit bigger for the game window, but then downsizing the stream output a little bit. So hopefully text is still readable on stream. And hello. Hello, Donnie in chat. All right, let me go ahead and figure out, okay. So I'm currently using, for years now, I've been using LOTRO in fully windowed mode. And just this last week as an experiment, I switched over to windowed full screen mode. And that's controlled in options under graphics. And there's three options here: full screen windowed, and windowed. And I've been using windowed for a long time because I find it traditionally unsettling for something to cover up the taskbar that I'm working with. And as we can see right now, the taskbar on this monitor is covered up until I hit the right key, and then we can see the taskbar. Excellent. And so when I pop open a window here, I have access to the buttons, great. But as soon as I click back on LOTRO, it's a full screen application, so it's covering up that start bar. And I find that unsettling as someone who uses the start bar a whole lot, especially during this stream. But we're going to try this today. We're going to see how it goes. And so if I seem to be struggling to find a window, that's probably what's going on there. So we're in full screen windowed mode, which still allows me to interact with other windows on my other monitor and on this monitor if I shove this one to the background. If you're on Windows, there's a keyboard shortcut, Alt-Escape, which says take this window that I'm currently interacting with and drop it to the bottom of the Z order. Put it underneath every other window on the screen. This is very helpful if you want to bring forward something else, because you're not really bringing forward the thing, you're just dropping LOTRO behind it. So I'm going to be using that a lot. Again, it's Alt-Escape, drops the Z order of your current window. You could also play around with doing Alt-Tab. So if I were to Alt-Tab, click that, cool. That works, but it only brings the one window forward. So if I happen to also have API documentation over here, let's go ahead and open up a window like that. So I'm going to bring this up, open up my API documentation. Maybe I have this, maybe I have some code going on here in the middle of the screen. And so I click back to LOTRO, Alt-Escape to drop it back to the bottom, and effectively all of those windows pop forward. So that's what we're going to be playing around with today. And again, if I seem to be struggling with it, it's because I've been running with this for like 3 days now, and it's taking some getting used to. Okay, little side explanation there. All right, let's go ahead and pull up the plugin manager. And in here, we have the Opaque Quest Tracker. So, the Opaque Quest Tracker is an opaque area underneath where, at least on my machine, the quest tracker shows up. Now, I don't have anything tracking. We should fix that. Let's go track some Moria quests. That's where I and the crew I play with on Treebeard are spending a lot of our time. And oh no, we can see that the Opaque Quest Tracker is not currently quite big enough to fit underneath all that text. So the traditional means of dealing with that would be come into the Opaque Quest Tracker, make sure we don't have anything locked, resize, and then come back in and lock it. Cool. Okay. Now, we were playing around last time with how do we make this easier? And we went down a false path, because splitting out the idea of locking in place and locking in size means the window, even when it's locked, still absorbs all of the left-click mousing which is a problem because I use left-click mousing to rotate my camera all the time or to interact with an NPC in some way. And so I don't, when this thing is locked, I want it to not be interacting with mouse input at all. And that means we can't be conditionally. I do not know of a way for a Lua callback function that has received mouse input to kick that back out and say, no, never mind, I don't want this, pass it on through. And so if we're absorbing that mouse input, it means that's not going to be used for camera. That's no good. That's not good for our purposes. And so we're going to go with an alternate option that we threw out there at the end of the last stream, which was, let's emulate this little lock button here, and it's going to show whether we're locked or not locked, and we'll just tuck it into one of these corners. And if we're being really adventuresome, we'll go ahead and allow in the options to specify which corner it's in. So upper left, upper right, lower left. But I want to avoid my instinct of using the upper right because the radar space here is a lot bigger vertically than it looks. Why is that quest ring? I'm getting a quest ring that's appearing way outside the radar. It's very strange. And so there's a lot of vertical space underneath that radar, where which also includes the location, Brie, and the coordinates. And so if that happens to overlap the Opaque Quest Tracker, then the radar intercepts the mouse, and then you can't click on the lock icon. And so I want to have it be an option. But first things first, let's get it showing up on the screen, and then we can move it around once we have it actually visible. Okay, so that's the idea. First thing, we went down that false path last time. It's time to go ahead and revert that. Now, if you're using source control, oh, that's fun. My start menu shows up on that screen. Oh, well, you get to see my start menu. All right, let's pause for a moment. Well, my source control decides to open itself. Where is it? Where are you, source control? It's thinking. Did it appear behind? Of course, it appeared behind LOTRO. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pop LOTRO to the back here, and we're going to check out Fork, which is currently looking at Cube plugins. Great. Now, there's stuff I'm in the middle of fixing some issues that I created in Deed Tracker, and we're not worried about 100 deadly decoy. So let's look at the Opaque Quest Tracker. Now, this is tracking the changes since the last time we did a commit. We took a snapshot of the state of the code. And so we can see here are the changes that we did. Now, sometimes I find this a little bit harder to read when it's doing first the one and then the other. You can also do a side-by-side comparison. Lots of source control tools have that as an option, or you might have an external third-party comparison program. I like using Beyond Compare, but there's plenty out there. So we can see we tried splitting the locked setting into both locked and movement. Locked for movement and locked for size. That's not going to work, so we're going to put that back. We can see that we had the ability to forward that old setting of locked and go ahead and split it out. Not going to need that anymore. Let's go ahead and get rid of that new line as well. All right, is resize enabled? So locked size, yeah, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. And is move enabled? Get rid of that. And we split apart that checkbox in the options. We're going to go ahead and just say nope. Get rid of all that. Let's see. Yeah. Doop. And is this also? Left movement. Yep. Nope. We don't need that either. Okay. So that was a quick way to review what we had done last time and say, nope, we don't want any of it, throw it away. If we were confident we didn't need any of it, we could have just thrown away the entire file, just reverted back to the last one. But I was curious if there was anything that snuck in that wasn't directly related to trying to split out that locked into both movement and size options. Oh, thanks, Moobot. Yes, those are some great plugins. Okay, so here are the notes that I said. Started to split out locked for movement and locked for resize, and this is just what I recapped before. So we're going to imitate the inventory lock icon to quickly lock and unlock the window. And we're going to have some opacity until we hover over that button. Cool. And we need to remember that when the window resizes, we need to move that lock button to stay with the wherever it is. All right, so that is good. I'm going to go ahead and come back into the game so I can unload and then reload that Opaque Quest Tracker. And then let's go ahead and go back into the options. We now have the lock. And when it's locked, we can click underneath and interact with the camera, or I can, let's see, can I interact with an NPC? Yes, I can click on an NPC. If I right-clicked on them, I'd probably start running at them. I don't want to do that. It's a long way down. Cool, we're good. So, lock icon. Now, you can always take a screen capture and save off icons and do that sort of thing, but it's very nice if you can just refer to the image ID inside the game. And so, let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. Now, when I want to get the ID for an image in game, the first place I go is the skinning pack. So let me go ahead and load that up. On LOTRO interface, on occasional basis, you will see an update whatever skinning pack. I haven't seen one more recent than this, but the update 25 skinning pack, if I go ahead and download this from LOTRO interface, we can see it's 40 some megabytes. Let's go ahead and pop that open. And yes, no, give me my file. There we go. So let's go ahead and extract that. That might actually take a minute because that could be a lot of small files. So I'm going to get that started. Excellent. And we'll see how long it looks like it's going to take. That's a lot of stuff. Okay. That could take a minute. We're not going to bother to wait for it. I have an old version downloaded. So let me find that a moment. Okay. So I have an old version that is just the skin DID map, which is a mapping of icons and their internal IDs. And this is a thing that I refer back to when I'm trying to find an image ID for something. There's probably other tools for this, and this is just a starting point. But we can see there are 4,183 links from a thing to the internal icon. And so if I search for the word lock, I see 35 matches down here. So if I just go ahead and grab things that say the word lock and pull them out, we can start seeing, cool, inventory lock, ghosted, locked, locked rollover, unlocked, unlocked rollover, unlocked pressed. These are all great. Now I'm curious why there's no locked pressed. Oh, because it doesn't have a different icon. That's fabulous. Okay, good. That is a detail I hadn't noticed. So there's 3 different states the icon can be in. It's just sitting there, or you are rolled over, and in that case it gets a little lighter and there's an outline, or it is clicked and that it gets a little darker. But it turns out they didn't implement a clicked version for the locked. Okay, that's okay. We can make do with that. So this is probably the image IDs that we want right here. Now I don't know what ghosted means in this context, but we're not interested in ghosting it, so that's fine. Okay, so we have our IDs. Now in the background we can see it's still extracting that newer one. I'm not going to worry about that, but I'll have that for later purposes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open up an Opaque Quest Tracker code file. So that we're going to go into Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, Plugins, Cube Plugins, that's me, and then Opaque Quest Tracker .lua. Here it says ghosted. Isn't that when you ignore your pending loop too long and then you never see it again? I would never do such a thing. I don't know what you're talking about. Actually, I think you've seen me post some images of this. I'm really interested in the Prime Loot bag, or maybe a homebrewed variation of it that lets you to find little pockets, named clusters, where stuff always shows up. Like the stuff that's in my inventory right now, that's all either kind of the stuff that I always run with, like morale and power potions and food and stuff, or it's quest items. And either way, it doesn't really need to be shown with the rest of the stuff. So I have thoughts on that. But for right now, we really just have an all-in-one file. And at some point, I feel like this should get separated out into a couple different files, but I just haven't gotten there yet. So we'll focus on, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the place. If we go ahead and I don't know if it's just me. My computer feels a little laggy, so I apologize if that causes problems on the stream end. But if we go ahead and come on in to here and create a new file, we can call this lock icon, lock control.lua. We'll start with that. Naming things is hard. And we're going to come on in here and just go ahead and paste those image references for a moment. Now, what we can do is we can just define variables that refer to that. So if we wanted to, instead of commenting those out, come on in here and instead, okay, we can't have the .tga. That's not a valid in a variable name, but the rest of that's not bad. Yeah, we'll just want to make sure that we end each of those lines with a semicolon, and that is a personal convention. Lua doesn't really care here. And we'll just start with that. Cool. Okay, so Opaque Quest Tracker. I'm curious, have we defined that depends? No. Oh, that's why I wasn't doing any class derivation stuff here, because I don't want to have to depend on the turbine files for such a small thing. Well, that's okay. Probably. So what is that looking like here? We have a create main window that defines a variable. Yeah, okay. So we want something similar. Function create lock control. And in this create lock control, we're going to create we're going to create control that does a couple of things. First, it's going to display the image of that lock, and we're going to make sure that we found the right one, because that's always a little bit of a danger when you're spelunking into the image IDs, is making sure you actually found the thing that you thought you found. So we'll start off by getting the unlocked image and presenting that in a control. So what do we need for that? We need and you know what? I'm going to just double check my syntax here. I want to make sure I import the turbine.ui. So import a turbine.ui. That look good? It does not. I need quotes there. Okay, we're going to import turbine UI. Excellent, because that's where we get our local lock control equals turbine.ui.control. And that's the starting point for any of our controls. Okay, now we want to remember to return lock control. And we're almost done. for our very basic one. We do want to set the background image, and for that, let's go back and look at how we do that, because I feel like it's set back image or set background or something. So let's come on in here. Set background. Excellent. Lock control. Oh, sorry, mentally thinking. Do I want to set a parent here, or do I want to just return the control and then the caller has to parent it? I think we're going to go with that. So no parenting needed. Set background. And we're going to go ahead and just pass the ID here, unlocked. Now, eventually we'll want to have it pay attention to settings and is the locked or unlocked setting set? But for right now, this is a good starting point. Oh, and we should probably set the size. Lock control, set size. Now, set size takes a width and a height. In this case, I think it is safe to say that that icon is 16 pixels by 16 pixels. But when in doubt, we can come on in here and grab a snipping tool. And then I don't think it'll show up very well. But once we have that, we can just open our MS Paints of the world, whatever basic image editing utility you have. Okay, select, highlight the thing. Cool. That's around 16 by 16 pixels. So we're going to start with that. I can use snipping tool and then Alt Escape to send that to the background. And we're going to set size 16 by 16. Now, all of these are 16 by 16. We could go ahead and say lock width equals 16, lock height equals 16. And then we don't have to have these magic numbers here in code. So now, why is this useful? Someday in the future, SSG may decide to upgrade the resolution of icons to support higher resolution monitors more fluently, so you don't have quite as pixelated stuff. In that case, we'll just have a single place that we can update this. Okay, maybe that's enough. Maybe we'll just leave that for right there. And we do need to remember to import lock control here. So import cube plugins, Opaque Quest Tracker, lock control. And that'll get that in. Oh, that's funny. Half of my import statements have a semicolon, half of them don't. That's great. I'm not going to worry about that right now, but that's just an example of where Lua doesn't really care in a lot of cases if you have a semicolon or not. Table declarations, it gets very picky, but import statements, it does not care. Okay. We have the control. So we're going to go ahead and use the create lock control in our create window function. Let's go ahead and hide some of these other functions that just don't matter right now. I'm going to collapse them down. Don't need get string, don't need our lang. Constrain, no, don't care about that. Load settings, save settings. And a lot of these, as I was saying, I think we're finally getting to the point where it'd be useful to split these out into different files. That's useful for two reasons. One, all the saving stuff in its own file, all the string stuff in its own file, that just makes it easier to find the thing that you're looking for and not have that in the way if you're not. And also, if anyone wants to do a patch on this plugin, then the more fragmented the code structure is, the fewer files they may have to touch in order to do their change. If all they're doing is changing some strings, then that's just the strings file and nothing else needs to change. Or if they're changing how things are saved or loaded, that's isolated to a single file. And so if you can fragment things up correctly, it can make it easier for patching to only affect just the files that are necessary. And why is that useful? Well, of course, patches can be fragile. If you release a new version of your plugin, the more files that patch touch, the more likely it is to not work with the new version of your plugin. But if your new version of the plugin changes files A, B, and C, and the patch only touched file D, it might still work. It might not. Depends on how things worked. But it stands a better chance of working than if you have file A, and that's it, and now you've changed file A. Well, the patch comes along and basically reverts file A back to a previous version. Everything's going to break. Like, it's going to be like you hadn't updated your plugin. So fragmentation can be very useful for helping patches be useful across multiple versions of your plugin. Okay, so where we were, the create main window function. Great. Let's come on in here and let's go ahead and grab that lock control. So right now, the main window function is actually pretty basic because our main window is a blob, right? Like we have a window, we have the background color and the size and position, and we have some handlers for the mouse. But that's really it. We don't have anything very complicated here. So if we go ahead and say, oh, I am curious, is window defined somewhere? Yeah, okay. Just double checking. So if we have local lock control equals create lock control and lock control set parent to window, that might be enough for us to see the lock control, just as a to convince ourselves that we're doing the right thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the skinning pack here and minimize that and minimize that. Awesome. So let's come on in back to the little caret menu, back in to plugin manager, and we're going to go ahead and unload and reload. Awesome. We can see that we have found the correct ID for the lock icon. And we can see that 16 by 16 lock in the upper left here. Great. More importantly, we can see that we have a function that creates it in a completely separate file, and then it's being placed here. Perfect. So what else do we need? Well, we have rollover icons, which is to say when the mouse is over the thing. So what do we need for that? We need two things. We need to say, yes, please deliver mouse events to this control. We can find that in the control class, set mouse visible, which is true if the control should, now it says if it should process mouse messages. Fair enough, yeah, if we want to receive mouse messages. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and say lock control, set mouse visible to true. And control events include mouse enter, which we're going to get when the mouse passes the boundary of the control, and mouse leave. So let's go ahead and implement those two to start. We have lock control dot mouse enter, and we're going to set that to anonymous function, and that's going to take a sender and args. This is the signature of every event handler in the LOTRO Lua API. And we'll go ahead and end right there. And in this handler, you know what? All I want to do right now is just confirm that we're doing the right thing. So terminate shell.writeLine sends to the standard output, and we're just going to say mouse enter. And let's do the same thing, actually. I'm going to do a little bit of copy paste here. And we're going to do the same thing for mouse leave. And we'll do that before doing anything else, just so we don't start beating our head against the wall trying to figure out why something is not working. So unload, reload, and I've suddenly realized that I haven't made a chat tab to monitor for plugin activity. So when I do this, I just rename it plugins, and then I go ahead and set up the filter for standard and error, and we don't need anything else. Very good. And this lets us see both the normal output from the plugin, as we can see right there, but also any errors that we happen to throw because we did something wrong. All right, and what do we see? We see one message when the mouse is over the control, and if you move over the control, no more messages, and then one message when the mouse is no longer over the control. Well, that's really useful because that's kind of precisely what this rollover icon is all about. So if we went ahead and said set background to unlocked rollover when we enter, and set it to unlocked when we leave, then, okay, unlocked, Cool, we can see that white border highlighting when the mouse is over the control. Awesome. Now, I've ignored the fact that we don't actually know whether we're in a state of locked or not locked right now. So let's go ahead and pay attention to that. So I don't care about the color picker, but the options control. So options, where is this happening? All right, we have a locked checkbox, and when that checkbox is changed, then, oh, you know, we're going to want to tell that lockbox when this changes here. We don't have a central broadcast mechanism. It just doesn't seem justified in a plugin this small. So we're going to bind things a little bit more together. And, you know, we'll go ahead and just say lock control. Now, lock control needs a way to be told about this. So lock control dot locked changed equals function is locked. So we're just going to define an anonymous function here. And it's going to take a Boolean parameter, true or false, yes or no. Okay. And we're saving that off as a global here. Neat. Okay, so back down to the options window here. We have the checked changed equals an anonymous function. Awesome. Is locked equals that. Okay. Oh, yes. So for locking it, all we're doing is setting mouse visible to false. That's pretty straightforward. But we can see two things. We have the settings opaque when locked setting. That's going to be really useful for that initial lock state. So local initial lock is locked. We'll just call it is locked equals that setting. And then we should probably just have a function, right? Function update background. And we're going to go ahead and pass in the lock control. And what do we want? We want do we want to have the logic in here? And we just say, here's the current state and the logic work out? I don't know. That's an interesting question right there. What do we have here? We have whether we're over it or not. Eventually, we're going to have whether we're clicked or not, and also whether we're locked or not. Locked, rollover, unlocked, pressed. Yeah. All right, we're going to come back to this. We're almost certainly going to have a function to help us, but we'll muddle through without it for right now. All right, so we have is locked, but you know, would it be useful to have that? No, probably not. Okay. We're going to go ahead and say set background. I'm second guessing myself. Get background. So we don't need the lock control. What we do need is locked and is over or is hover and is clicked. And we're going to come back to those other ones. But for right now, we're going to say if is locked. That's brace style. That's not going to work. Then we want to return this. Return that. Else return the unlocked version. We're not going to worry about rollover or anything right now. Just is it locked or not? Okay. And then we're going to set the background not to this directly, but get background and is locked. And you know what? We don't even have to worry about those other ones. We're not going to pass them. We're not going to use them. We'll come back to that. Add more parameters. All right, that's our note to ourselves. So we still need a set background here. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing. Excuse me. And I'm realizing I want to save off this is locked setting. So I'm going to come back in here and actually save it off in lock control. Okay, so we have is locked saved off. And we're going to go ahead and pass that, and same thing here, get background, that. So that's a starting point. Obviously not finished yet. Let's go ahead and unload and load and see if we have any major syntax errors. We do not. Awesome. But we can see that right now, it actually defaulted to the locked icon, which we were not before, and that's awesome. But if I unlock and lock here, they're not in sync yet. That's okay. Let's go ahead and get those in sync first. So we have lock control, and we have a function, locked changed, locked change, and that is locked. Great. And then in lock control, when that happens, we can say lock control is locked equals is locked. And we can go ahead and set that background. Now, what I'm building towards is a function that takes over the set background, but I'm not quite there yet. I don't have that mentally, what that's going to look like. That's okay. But we can see, we keep calling it with the same stuff. Set background, get background, lock control is locked. It's the same one for each of these calls. And that tells us we can simplify that. We can factor out those common bits into a function. So that's very promising. But, okay, so set background, get background, that, awesome. Let's come back out, unload, reload. Okay, we still can't interact with that icon, but if we come in here and click unlock, well, it didn't work, but it was supposed to. Let's go take a look at that. What happened? We're not seeing any error messages in the output, but maybe this is a good time to add some debug messages so we can check on that. So turbine.shell.write line. Let's go ahead and, oh, there's a beacon. Thanks, Moobot. Let's go ahead and write out that we're just in the locked changed function. And toString is locked. We'll go ahead and write out what that parameter that's passed in is as well. Okay. Oh, excellent. There we go. We're getting a table, not a Boolean value as I thought we were. So that's an important difference. Let's come back in to here. Is locked equals checkbox is checked. Well, I would swear that should work. What's going on here? Okay, well, easy enough. Let's go ahead and add another debug output and make sure that I haven't done something very strange here. Okay, that's what I was expecting. Check changed, false. Awesome. I wonder if it's as simple as me using a dot instead of a colon. There we go. Okay. Because I'm so used to using inheritance-looking, class-looking things from some of my other plugins, this one's not using that. And so we want to remember to use the dot notation so that we're not passing the this flag over, or if we are going to do that, then we can't necessarily use this dot notation here. That mismatch, I think, was throwing us for a loop. Okay, so excellent. We'll go ahead and remove those two debugs. And more importantly, we can see that we are getting icon changes over here where it's staying in sync now with the setting. Perfect. Okay, now that's not bidirectional. So if we click on that icon and that's locking or unlocking, it's going to have to be telling the options window about this. But this is a great start. Okay. What we next want to do is come back into this mouse enter and mouse leave, because right now we're not paying attention anymore to the hovering, and that was pretty cool. We got that really fast. I'm going to move this output down a little bit. There we go. So we can see that too. I don't need all those skills. Okay, so mouse enter. We're setting a background, but now get background. Remember, we have the isHover parameter. So what we want is true and false. But we don't necessarily just want true and false. We might want to save off isHover. So lock control isHover equals false. And then we can say lock control isHover equals true when we enter, and lock control isHover equals false when we exit. Then we can do the same thing. Lock control isHover. Let's go ahead and pass that on. And it should be really telling that we're passing the same thing here, that we are going to be able to refactor that. But here we go. Is locked, then if isHover, then, and what do we have here? We have locked and rollover. We do have that. Return inventory locked rollover, else return inventory locked, and same thing. If isHover, then else, and end. And what's that one going to be? Unlocked rollover. Awesome. Do need a return statement though. All right, so we're going to go ahead and unload and reload, and oh yes, we have a hover over while it's locked, and come into options. Let's unlock that, and we still have a hover over. That's lovely. So everything's going great there. Okay, so the final part is clicked. We don't have a way to interact with this yet. So what are our options? We have mouse down and mouse up. Mouse down fires when the mouse button is pushed, and mouse up fired when a mouse button is released. Now there's two ways that can happen in this windowing system. I can press down, move off of it, and press and release, or I can press down and release. And we generally consider, if you have dragged the cursor off and then release, that is a cancel action. You are not doing the thing. That's really useful if you click and you're like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. Well, just drag off of there and release, and you didn't do it. So that's a very nice convention to have. And we'll know which one of those to do because we are already tracking whether or not we're still over the button. So lock control, if we're doing where was that? lock control dot mouse down. There we go. Okay, mouse down equals function sender args and okay, what do we do? Lock control dot is mouse down equals true. We want to track that and then update background. And then lock control, we can go ahead and just spec out the pair here. Mouse up equals function with a sender and an args, and same thing. Lock control is mouse down equals false. Exo asks, could you just use mouse click? As I recall, it doesn't register mouse up unless you're still hovered. Absolutely. I'm actually defeating 2 mythological creatures with 1 superior weapon here because I'm emulating or trying to emulate the UI, which has 3 different states. The icon is just sitting there, the icon is hovered over, and the icon is clicked but not yet activated. And you can see subtle differences between each of those states. Hovering over, we get a white border, and the color might lighten a little bit. It might just be the border, but the color darkens if you've clicked it, and that gives you that feedback that you have actually clicked on the thing. And you can't get that with a click. You can only get that by responding to the mouse down, but then you're responsible for handling the mouse up as well. And so if I click and then move and then release, we can see it does not activate the button. If I click and release, it does. And if I click and move, but I'm still on it, it does. So that's what they're doing in this UI, effectively. It could be different under the covers, but they have a way of saying, okay, you've pressed it, but haven't released it yet. Hexa says tuned in late. No worries, no worries. So yeah, we're conflating 2 different things here. We do care about whether we're clicking, but from an aesthetic standpoint, we're also recreating that visual nature. And also, as a side effect, or a side thing, we noticed that they did not include an alternate image if it's locked and being pressed. I'm pressing down right now, but there's no change in the UI. And we see that because there's only 5 instead of the 6 images that we would expect here. Now we could, of course, supplement our own. That's not a today problem, but we can always make our own, save it as an image file, and then just have 5 of these be internal images and 1 of them be our own, right? That's totally doable. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to have a 6th logic path that just does the same thing. Okay, so we have lock control is mouse down equals true and false, and then we need to update the background. Lock control set background, and again, we're going to refactor all of these out because we're always passing the same things, but for now we're not quite there yet. So. Exercise. I have way too many GNU image manipulation program GIMP files of UI icons at this point. Yeah, I totally get it. I was showing earlier how you can use the skin ID map. This is the update 22, so it's very old. But how you can, if you're lucky, you can find the thing and the corresponding ID file, internal ID number. And so that's what we did here. Inventory lock. So we found these. I wonder if ghosted is related. All right, I'm going to pull ghosted in as well while I'm thinking about it. And of course, I'll comment this with, what is this? We'll come back to that. But I am curious. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get background. Lock control is locked. Lock control is hover. And finally, we're going to pass lock control is mouse down. And we're going to do the same thing here as well. And we're almost ready to refactor that out so it doesn't look nearly so bad. So we have is clicked. So if it's locked, well, do we have something for that? If it is unlocked, we have something for that. So if it's unlocked, is hover, then if is clicked, then return, I don't know, else return that. So what is the thing? We have pressed, the inventory lock pressed. Now, just for kicks, I am curious about that. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Equals there. Let's go ahead and use that ghosted one just out of curiosity. All right. Let's go ahead and unload and reload. And okay, that caused a problem. What did I do? End expected. Yeah, probably. 57. Oh, that's the wrong comment, of course. I'm so used to / being a valid comment character. That's on me. Okay. Oh, that's wacky. So that's what they call ghosted. And do we see that? Like, when would you see that for the inventory? Maybe if your inventory was completely empty, it wouldn't let you click that? As if that ever happens. Well, that is not suitable for our purposes, but that's neat to know that exists. Okay, we'll come on back in here. We're going to kill that ghosted one and just go back and restore the locked. Okay, so what does this look like? If we come in here, we have a hover over for locked. We have a hover over for unlocked. If I click, I get that depressed state. Oh, interesting. But if mouse leaves, we're not quite there yet. So if is unlocked, okay. If hover, yep. We need in here, if is clicked, then return unlocked pressed, else end. Now, this is why a lot of times you'll see a generic class that handles rolling over and alternate stuff baked into a utility file, and then you just specify, here are the 3 images, right? A lot of this is boilerplate code that just handles the different states of, are you over it? Are you clicking on it? Is it in a yes or a no state? Like, you don't need to write this every single time. Exo says, yes, I went full custom. It's been fun to do the skinning side. It's also been not fun at times. I get that. UI is one of my weaknesses at my day job. I much prefer the stuff that humans don't look at, just computer to computer talking. It just feels a lot easier. Don't have to deal with those fickle humans. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Does that replicate the behavior that we're looking for? So I'm just comparing. Oh, that's interesting. If you click and leave, the border doesn't go away yet. Okay, so if is hover, okay, if not, if is clicked, then interesting. Going to have to write all this down. Exo says, I don't think you can do that when it shouldn't be listening to mouse up at that point. I thought it was if you were still dragging from a mouse down. But that's a good point. Let's do an output, turbine.shell.writeLine, just to say, when are we getting this mouse up? You might be right. There are some limitations because we're not doing backend UI code. We're just doing plugin UI code. We don't necessarily have the ability to do all of the really granular manipulations of the UI that you can do if you are the UI. But that's okay. Let's pop on in here and say, get rid of that. So down, up, down, click, up. And we can see we do get the mouse up if we started with the mouse down. Exo says, shoot. No, it's a control. All the other controls are now ignoring mouse events. but that one is still doing the events. Yeah, that's seems to be the case. Oh, of course, I'm unlocked here. Let's go ahead and lock. Yeah, so that's actually giving us the behavior we kind of want, because we started doing a mouse down. We do want the control to get that. So that's nice that we're getting that that behavior. Okay, so this function is getting a little silly, right? And what we could very much use is some documentation. So of what we're trying to do. So if icon is locked, if icon is not locked. Of course, the problem is this is looking very much like the code because of the way the variables are labeled. So what do we have? What's not working? Or I should say, what's not quite the same way? Oh, you know what? We don't have the clicking yet, actually. So let's go ahead and finish that, and then we'll come back to the UI. So mouse down, mouse up. So what we want to do is, if we're still, if lock control dot is hover, if we're still inside, then tell options to toggle, which will then call locked changed. Now we need a way to do that. We don't currently have that, but that's okay. We can just make it up. So when locked checkbox is doing something here, it has access to locked control. We can also just give locked control a reference to the locked checkbox. There's nothing that says we can't do that. So we can say locked checkbox dot, and this is binding the options to other parts much more tighter than I would want to in a larger plugin. This is just for convenience because this is like a one file plugin here. But there are better ways to do this where you have maybe something in charge of options that can signal, that can notify multiple components that something has changed. There are better ways, but this is super duper easy, and so that has its benefits. So we're doing lock control dot lock checkbox equals locked checkbox, and now they have a reference to each other. Okay, so lock control dot lock checkbox dot set. Oh, what is the thing for a checkbox? Let's just double check. Now this was a turbine.ui.lotro checkbox because it's a skinned themable thing, and we want to go ahead and say set checked. Yeah, there we go. Set checked. Okay. Set checked to not lock control is locked. We're just going to invert that. Okay, now the real question is, if we call set checked, is that going to trigger the checked changed callback? Well, let's find out. It sure looks like it. In fact, if we take a look at both of these together, we can see, despite the not greatness of binding those two together, at least we can check that, move this around, and then recheck it, and this is locked. So that gets us a long way. Now, before we move on, let's look back at this function. I keep saying we're going to do something about it. Now is the time, because every single time we've called set background, we're passing the same stuff. What we really should do is have a function get background. I'm going to call it get background 2 for a moment, that takes the lock control and then effectively does what we're currently doing. So you could even say return get background lock control dot is locked, lock control is hover, and so on. So instead, what we're going to go ahead and do is modify the existing function, and say local is locked equals lock control is locked. And this is where having some object orientedness would be helpful. We could just do self whatever, but it's very similar under the covers. Is hover equals lock control is hover. Local is clicked equals lock control dot is clicked. There we go. And then each place where we're calling it background, let's just pass lock control. Lock control. Whoops. Still need 2 of those. Okay, so lock control, lock control, lock control, and lock control. So we can see this got much more straightforward. And this function always has access to those 3. We didn't depend on the calling function to pass them along. Okay, well, let's take a look and see, well, first of all, did we make any syntax errors with that set of changes? Looks like the answer is no. So we can still lock and unlock. If I click, looks like somewhere along the line I have lost my my clicking dark image. So that's okay. Let's see. Is hover and is clicked, we should get pressed. You know, it wouldn't be terrible to go ahead and turbine.shell.writeLine and just give us some state. So get background is locked. And here we do need to call toString because Lua doesn't like concatenating Boolean values. Is locked. And we're going to go ahead and, nope. Let's see if we can put this on multiple lines. So we're going to go ahead and is hover, toString is hover, and finally is clicked. All right, let's take a look at that. Let's see if I messed up that syntax. Not too much, actually. Didn't put a space after that comma, but that's more of a visual thing than anything. All right, let me pull this front and center so we have it. We can see when I hover over, hovering is changing. Oh, we can see is clicked is nil. I don't like that. Oh, it's is mouse down. No wonder. Let's go ahead and just fix the reference here, is mouse down. We're not going to worry too much about the is clicked. I lied. I'm going to fix it. I saw there's only 4 of them here. We're going to go ahead and fix that right now before it gets more pervasive. All right. Excellent. And we got it back. We got, everything is working. And you know, now that I think about it, the problem was these earlier get background calls were not passing those later variables that we were introducing, specifically the is mouse down. Now that they're all using that same way of just passing the control and embedding the information in the control, we're doing great. So we have hover over for both locked and unlocked. We have clicking for locked. For unlocked, but we don't have a separate one for locked. That's just the way it is. And we can click. Oh, that's very promising. And that means we can go ahead and get rid of this debug statement. Now, just in case, I'm going to go ahead and save it off, just comment it out here. And we're back. And so I'm going to go ahead and put this chat window away. It did a great job of helping us find that issue. When you're expecting a true or false and you're seeing a nil, that is a definite warning sign that something has gone wrong. Okay, so what do we have? We have created kind of a pseudo class that has the idea of being a checkbox. Now this is tightly bound in with the rest of the program. It knows about options. Options knows about this. This is not the best way to go about writing it, but for a simple little change to a one file plugin, this is not the worst thing in the world. It's a good starting point. We can always make it better later. So I'm going to go ahead and, Steady Eddie has asked, what's your favorite plugin that you've made? Do you have a GitHub too? Well, Steady Eddie, that is a two-part question. First of all, I do use GitHub for my source control. And for my client GUI application, I use Fork to wrap around the Git instance. But as a follow-on to that, currently my GitHub repositories are just private. They're just mostly me messing around, and so I haven't really felt like opening them up to the world would be a good service for the world yet. But I think at some point that's probably a good idea, because if in the I get hit by a bus scenario, it'd be great if someone else had access to those at some point. So that's on my to-do list. I keep having other things that are on my to-do list as well. And then favorite plugin, I think, would have to be the deed tracker. It's the most complicated and the one that solved the biggest "can this be done" question. Certainly the 100 Deadly Decode was a fun one, especially here on the Treebeard server, where low-level adventuring was much more dangerous, and having a knowledge of when the decode was going to explode was very appealing. And so deed tracker... Exo said, no, the greatest legacy you can leave as a programmer is ensuring that as many things as possible break in the event of your demise. That would certainly incentivize keeping me around, but that would be inconvenient for other people. So this is the deed tracker. This is a representation of your deed log. And one of the things that really bothered me about the deed log, like, I understand why it does this, but when you go into the deed log, and let's just go into somewhere like the, where's the troll shaws? There we go. Troll shaws. Of course, they're all done. When you look at the list of deeds, either completed or not completed in the in-game deed log, they are sorted first by category. So all of your exploration ones are first, and then the lore, and then the reputation, and then Slayer. And there are other categories like event and class and whatnot. But those are the big ones, right? You'll see these on almost every regional deed page. Shirley says, that man loves his deed. I do like my deed logs. I do like my deeds. So they're sorted first by type, and then they're sorted alphabetically. And so what you'll get is something like the reputation deeds here. Deeds in the wilderness, and then advanced, and then final. That happens to work out here. But sometimes you'll get them in not the straight order. You'll also have crawler and crawler advanced, giant and giant advanced. That's fine. But then Slayer, the wrapper, is in the middle here because it's alphabetical. And then troll, and then white, and then wolf and worm, and all of that. And so that was a thing that I wanted a better visual representation of what is the hierarchy, what do you have to do in order to do other things. And so here we are in the troll shaws, and we can see there the meta here is the deeds of the troll shaws. And to complete that, you have to do explorer and deeds in the wilderness and slayer, which is your classic explorer and doing quests and doing slayers. And the slayers, you can see, you have to do each of the advanced, and under that you have to do each of the basics. And this sort of hierarchical view was a lot more appealing to me than the alphabetical view. And some regions are way worse than troll shaws as far as what's going on there. And some are just more complicated. Like if you look at Avendom, actually Avendom, no, Avendom is not the best example of this. Was it Dunland or Enedwaith where you were only doing the basics for the Slayer? It was very strange. Oh well, in Enedwaith, for example, you have some of the Slayer deeds are underneath your wrapper. So Protector of Enedwaith has some of the Slayers under there, but there's no Slayer wrapper there. But then the Giant Slayer and Grabber Slayer aren't underneath that meta. Like there's all sorts of fun stuff that happens. Lots of little variations between regions. Exo says, and how many fake deeds have you stuck in to make people do random tasks for absolutely no reason? I actually haven't done that. Over on the LOTRO companion Discord, someone was suggesting, if user equals this person who was having a problem, then, error out, don't do the thing. And like you could do that, right? You could have if a player name equals shoreless skies, then, mess up in some way. You could target a specific player name. I have not fallen prey to that, but it is possible to do such a thing. But I have not. I think, it constantly surprises me how many downloads the deed tracker has. And of course, downloads isn't a number of people who use it, because if one person downloads it 5 times, or if one person downloads each of 5 different versions, each one of those is tracked. So it's not a good estimate of how many people are using it. But there's probably a few thousand people out there who enjoy using the deed tracker. I'm certainly one of them. And I break it enough accidentally just trying to improve it, as I have done on this last release in at least 2 ways that are on my to-do list to fix this week. So it's already breaking in multiple ways just by entropy. It doesn't need me to go in and actively break it more. Exo says, I've certainly been tempted to flash race change required on screen if a Hobbit loads auras. Yeah, that is fair. All the other races do need to change to Hobbits, and that's a reasonable thing to remind Hobbits that they are superior. Okay, anyway, I don't know, hopefully that answers your question, Steady Eddie, but Deed Tracker is the biggest and most complicated plugin that I have done. I think if we do the plugins command, you'll see it listed there as well. I do recommend the LOTRO plugin compendium, but you can also download these manually at lotrointerface.com. And then I've had my hand in doing some patch files for other ones. Like there's some very niche plugins. For instance, LOTRO interface. Oh, that browser's in a different screen. So LOTRO interface, if we come in here and we search for rich, this is a truly excellent plugin for the treasure event, and is only useful during the treasure event, which happens about 2 times a year. But I would not want to do the treasure event without it. It's delightful. Study ID asks, can you hit external APIs with the Lua plugin? Is there an HTTP library for it? In general, no. In general, this is a locked down version of Lua. But if you are interested in kind of exploring what is out there, you can go and download, and let me pull up the plugin compendium here. Where are you? Plugin compendium. Sometimes it takes a minute to load. Okay. Oh, there it is. I was just about to search for it. Okay, so if you search for dragon, here be dragons. Here be dragons is a fun little debugging tool. I'm going to go ahead and just add it in. Cool, downloaded, installed, all good. So here be dragons is a way to explore the memory space, and what you can see here is the global table for Lua. And this is kind of a place where you can see, oh, here's what's available in the math library. Here's what's available in this string or table. And so it's a way to explore what kinds of things are available, what functions are available. Sorry, just glancing over at chat here. So I don't know if this is exhaustive. Maybe there are functions out there, for instance, that you could use that aren't showing up here. But I generally kind of assume that, coroutines, interesting. I generally assume that these math functions are probably available if I wanted to do random or cosine or something. I could probably do that. I could probably use the pi, since those are available in the global table here. And I generally assume that this is a very locked down version of Lua, and there's no communicating outside the game. This is very sandboxed. You can do stuff with normal Lua functions, and you can interact with the Lua API, the LOTRO API. as described in the API documentation. There's definitely been people who've been saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could communicate off board, if you could send messages to other people, if you could do all this stuff. And in general, this is a more constrained environment for safety, security, all of that. Now, there are some people who've done some really interesting things, like there's a section of the Prime plugins. If we come on over to LOTRO interface and search for Prime, excellent. There is a Prime plugin that works with a Prime sound player. And the Prime sound player is an external desktop application. So you turn on chat logging, where your combat chat is written out to a log file in real time, and this external application monitors changes to that file, and I think it's combat log, and it can trigger the playing of sound files through your speaker based on what's happening in the game with a slight delay. And so that's fascinating to me, and I keep thinking about possible ways to play around with that. For instance, if you have logging of your combat log, you could do after the fact combat analysis. And if you had a centralized depot where everyone in the raid could just chuck their files into, you could munge that all together for a kind of a full picture of what everyone saw happening during the raid, all the damage, all the healing, that kind of thing. It wouldn't be a live combat analysis, but it would be as complete as possible combat analysis. Not being a raider myself, it's kind of a fun mental exercises. Exo says, one of those exists and works in real time. Do you know the name of that by chance? Like I was saying, I'm not a big time raider or anything at this point in my life, and so it's an interesting theoretical mental exercise, but I don't know that I'll ever be obsessed enough with the idea to go into digging into the plugin logic for that. Oh, and one of the things I really like about plugins, about Prime, is this idea of custom bag buckets. Oh, okay. Exo says not shared publicly. That's fine. If you're willing to hit me up with that later in a private message, go for it. Otherwise, no worries. Okay, so Prime Bag is one I've been playing with because I think it's it's got some bugs in it, but B, it really fits my playstyle of, there's some things that I just do not care about, like they're in my inventory, but I don't want to, like they're always going to be in my inventory, food and pots and that kind of thing. And there's some things where I when I get them, they're just going to go straight into a shared inventory bag or a vault bag. These are for my other character. These are medals. These are whatever. And so this kind of just segmenting out makes it very easy to just, at the end of the day, just toss everything into the appropriate buckets, name to name, name to name, name to name, everything that's left, sell it all, and done. So I'm playing around with ideas on how I want to make this fit my particular playstyle better, but still be customizable. But that's a different conversation. Okay, so cool, good question. Thanks, Steady. Okay. So where are we? We were about to go into source control and maybe take a snapshot since we have some working code here. So let's take a look. Added lock control, which can trigger lock/unlock. Lock control also has rollover and click animations. Neat. So we have that. I guess I should double check. Did we have anything egregiously debuggy? No, all looks good. And then here's where we used that. Neat. Oh, don't show me other stuff. Okay. So we're going to just take a snapshot before we go break stuff. Okay. So one of the things, Exo, one of the reasons I had that in my head was I don't believe that chat logging adds a lot of undue processing to one's computer, but I could believe that the processing of 11 other combat logs coming across chat could slow stuff down. And if you're in a position where you want real-time chat logging, real-time monitoring of combat, you're probably also in the situation where you do not want plugins to slow down your game experience. Or maybe you're in the case that your computer is so fast it doesn't matter. I don't know. But I tend to assume that people who want that detailed level of information also don't want to pay a performance penalty to get it. And maybe there's a sweet spot for, yeah, we don't need it now, but after the combat analysis, where everything gets munched together into a single pot. Oh, Exo says not done via plugin, done via an external Python script. Okay. So it sounds like it does use chat logging and then parsing. Neat. Okay. So, what are we missing here? You know, I had a README file. Let's go take a look at that README file. Oh, to-do file, I should say. Okay, so we wanted, okay, done with that. Inventory lock icon. We've got an imitation of that going, and we've seen how to handle rollovers and click and different animations. Cool. Oh, lock icon should be around 25% opaque until mouse over. Well, that's pretty easy to do. Oh, there's here be dragons. Let's go ahead and unload all just to start us with a blank slate and bring that back in. Now, opacity. We should be able to do something with that. There we go. Okay, so doing opacity. Yeah. We have a set opacity call on the control class, and it takes a value between 0 to 1, as Exo has kindly thrown into chat there, set opacity. And so we can have a similar function, get opacity, lock control, and that function can just say if lock control dot is hover, then return 1, else return, and we're going to start with 0.5 here, and then we'll see. And Exo comments, if you set stretch mode anything, you need to set the opacity on the stretched items individually, otherwise it should just obey parent opacity. Unfortunately here we just have the single control with the single background. Okay, so I think anytime we, I'm looking at this, and every time we call get background, we're just calling set background, right? And so let's just have a function. Oh, we're done with that. Let's have a function, lock control dot update background equals function and in here we're going to go ahead and say local new background equals get background lock control. We don't have to save it off as a variable. I'm just walking through the process here. And then lock control set background to new background. We also want the local opacity equals get opacity for lock control, and then lock control set opacity to that opacity value. And now we have an update background function, and so we can go ahead and just say lock control dot update background. And we don't need the set background, get background. At least I think we don't. We'll see how that works out. Plus, by rolling in the opacity in this call, we are going to get that for free. Okay, well that looks like all of those places that we needed to change. Let's see if we broke it. Well, the locking sure still works. What I'm not saying is that opacity. So let's come back in here. Turbine dot shell dot writeLine setting opacity opacity to, and we'll just go ahead and concatenate in opacity. Nice. Unload, load, and we'll just pull this up here. Setting opacity to 0.25. Well, that just doesn't seem true, does it? But we have lock control, set opacity. Okay. Windows will make use of opacity to determine how they are blended within the game. Well, that's an interesting question. Do I need to update the set blend mode? I don't know. Exo seems to be much more used to doing opacity and blending than I am. But what I do remember is that the Garen's thread on writing LOTRO plugins has a section on blend mode. So I'm going to just pull it up and see, do we see anything useful? This seems like it could be formatted better though. Ah well, it may have been written a long time ago. Oh, interesting. I don't see an opacity. Oh, there. Okay. Blend. Yeah, EXO says what I was thinking is that it shouldn't require anything, and therefore I probably have done something wrong. Let's go ahead and start by just setting lock control, set opacity to 0.25 explicitly. Okay, let's always set it to 0.25. That sure doesn't look very opaque. What is going on here? Lock control, set opacity. Oh, that's funny. The documentation says 0, yeah, 0 is fully transparent, 1 is fully opaque. That's what I would expect. Okay, set opacity 0. Yeah, that's not working. I wonder if I'm missing something for opacity. The parent, in this case, definitely has its own ideas on opacity, but that's not really following through here. Because the whole point of the parent is that it is somewhat transparent. But that button is definitely very visible. Maybe I'm missing something. Well, just for curiosity, what's blend mode do? Yeah, no, that didn't do anything. Okay, we're going to put a pin in that. It would be definitely nice to have, and there's nothing wrong with the code as it sits right here. We're definitely getting an opacity value. And that opacity value is being correctly calculated based on whether we're over it or not. But it's not a deal breaker if that doesn't get to work. So, okay. I'm going to go ahead and say, can lock icon be around 25% opaque until mouse over ? And we'll put a pin in it, come back. Oh, Exa says, oh, is the lock a child of the background? Well, I parented the lock on the background I parented the lock in the window. The window is the only thing that's there because it had to be parented by something. So create main window, this is the window that is being opaque. And then when we get the lock control, its parent is the window. So there's a top level control in there somewhere. And so it sounds like from your question that the opacity of the main window there is going to come into play. Set opacity in here. Sure. All right. Window set opacity 0.5. Yeah, that'll do it. Okay. 0. Now, of course, that's not great because we're already changing the background here using colors instead of we're filling it with a color that happens to be opaque. But okay, yeah, it definitely has to do with the parent. So it sounds like if the lock is parented by its own window that's just sort of hidden and is the same size as the control, that could be a thing. Or if the opaque window had a window that had a child that was the main background and also a child that was this button. It sounds like those might be ways to explore. Exa says, yeah, my thing is that set opacity don't actually set the parent opacity. I overwrite the parent opacity, set the opacity of all the children because virtually everything I do is stretched. So I'm going to make a comment here. It looks like being parented to the main window is causing the parent's opacity to dominate. So that's something we can come back to later, but it was not a deal breaker. Okay, remember when the parent resizes, we need to move this thing. Now the good news is, if it's in the upper left, that's not a problem. But if we want to go ahead and support different locations for this, and that's sort of a question is this releasable as it is, or does it really need to be something that we can move around? I think it's pretty straightforward to move, but we're going to have to do some math to pin it to the various locations. All right, anything worth committing here? Lock control, yeah, okay. Refactored lock control logic a bit. Yeah, we want to go ahead and capture all of that. And anything in here? Oh, yeah, I also want that. Okay, we're going to take a snapshot of that since that part is working great. Okay, so in the options window, we have the lock window in place. We can also have a couple of buttons that determine where this lock icon appears. So let's go into the options screen here, and we have the draw options control, and right underneath the lock in place, let's see. We can go ahead and add in a couple of controls. And you know what? They could just be something as simple as 4 buttons next to each other. So let's have a new string in lang. So lang options locked, and we'll say lock icon location. And naming things is hard, words are hard, but choose location of lock icon. Axel was going to look to see if they have a cheat for this, but they say, never mind, the blend mode opacity tricks don't work with images. I have a feeling, Axel, if I parent the control in its own window and pass that window back as the control that lives on but not parented by this other window, and we just move them concurrently, the opacity thing will work itself out. So that's one of those. I put a pin in it mentally. I think I have a solution and a path forward for it, but it is not worth fooling around when I could instead add more options. Okay, but thank you for looking into that. I appreciate that. It'd be nice if there was something a little bit simpler than that refactoring, because I don't really want it to be its own window, but if it has to be its own window to have opacity, then so be it. Okay, add controls to determine lock icon location. Next one says, did find one thing that makes it transparent but also tints the image random colors. So that's weird. I mean, you could call that a feature or you could call it a bug. Disco mode. But probably not very helpful most of the time. Okay, so what I'm imagining, and sometimes when I'm trying to have a path forward for UI, I'll just pull up MS Paint. But other thing that I'm imagining is just a little upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right, and none, because maybe they just don't want that. So none, and then upper left, and then upper right, lower left, and the buttons would be large enough to see this, and then lower right. So I'm imagining something like this, but better. So that's what's in my head right now. Oh, thanks, Moobot and Little Redhead. Yeah, I don't do very much with skins, but there's some really pretty ones out there. Mostly I just see them on someone else's screen and in their screenshots. Okay, so we want, lock icon location, lock icon location upper left equals this. So we have English equals upper left. And then let's replicate that a few more times. And we have upper right. Upper right. We have a lower left. And we have a lower right. And of course, we have none. What did I say that here? None. Okay. Nice. It's always nice. If you're giving people an option on where to put something, and it's not a required thing, yeah, give them an option to turn it off. Why not? Some people may think this is the worst idea ever, and they might be right. I don't think so, but you never know. Okay, so we want a couple of buttons, right? So we need local upper left button equals turbine.ui.lotro.button, and we're going to go ahead and parent that upper left button, set parent to options. And then upper left button, set text. We're going to go ahead and get that string. And that's going to be lang.options.lock icon location upper left. There we go. And we'll go ahead and bring that in here. Okay, what other things do we want? We want upper left button, set position. Where are we? Left margin, and then control top is probably good. And we'll need a size as well. Now, the sizes that we have been doing for like change color, that's way bigger than we need. So that width of 150, let's go ahead and knock that down. Set width to 75 and see how that looks. Now, of course, hard coding sizes like this, when you don't know how long it's going to be in German or French, is fraught with danger, but that's something to deal with later, because this will be pretty straightforward to make wider in general later on. Okay, we have the text. We have upper left button set checked. I don't know. We're going to store this somewhere, but I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. Okay, and then finally, upper left button dot, what is it? Buttons are dot click. So we're gonna go ahead and make that function, sender args. And in that function, right now, we're just gonna do a simple turbine.shell.writeLine and say upper left. I really just wanna make sure that this button is working at this point. Okay, for that, we want to do something very similar for right. I'm just going to combine every reference of left and make it right instead. That should be capitalized, right. Oh, that was overzealous of me. Here, we'll start by upper left button, upper right, and then what else is left? Left margin, nope. Upper left, yeah, we want to change that. Upper right, and then the text. Okay, so we'll bring that back in, and that's a good starting point, actually. We'll want to go ahead and do control top equals control top plus shove everything else further down. Well, let's see what that looks like before we go too far. Oh, those buttons are going to be on top of each other. That's not good. Oh, and it looks like it's not big enough yet. So let's set that plus 100 just to start. Great. Upper left, upper right. That is excellent. Let's go ahead and do the same thing, but upper right is going to become lower right. And then upper, what else we have? We have lower, and then the debug. Great. So we're going to go ahead and bring that in, but we want to go ahead and bring that control top plus, let's say 30, actually. And then we're going to do plus 30 again. Excellent, except we still have that margin. Exo suggests putting them inside a horizontally aligned list box to automatically align it. That's probably the better solution. Right now I'm pursuing this mental image of having a little grid of the buttons with a button in the middle to just turn it off. And so, this is probably not a great UI experience, but it's what's in my head right now. So I'm just trying to get it out into the world, and then we'll figure out what's wrong with it. If that makes sense. All right, control top, that wasn't nearly far enough down. Let's go ahead and do like 80 and see. Now these are some magic numbers here, but they're there because I don't know what they should be. Whoa, that was too much. Okay, we can see we're pushing stuff down too far. And that is a thing where we're setting our size. Let's go ahead and just set that size bigger. Great. Exo says, I do find it a little annoying that you can't really do a grid Let's make a bunch of horizontal boxes and place them in a single vertical box. Interesting. I haven't tried doing layouts like that. I mostly have done hard-coded layouts in some fashion, which is not great, but it has meant I haven't had to deal with that particular trickiness. Okay, let's go ahead and get that lower, oh, that was the lower right button. Let's get a lower left button. All right, so we have an upper left button. Let's go ahead and change upper to lower. And where else do we have? Upper, great, lower, and then down in this text. So if I'm doing the same thing over and over like this, I start thinking maybe I should have an array and not have like distinct items like this. Probably that an array would be better. But for now, there's only 5 buttons, so doing them manually like this lets me play around with them, and then abstract them out into an array of just 5 buttons later. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do a none button as well. So, none button, and then lower location, probably I said none. Great, let's go ahead and put that in as well. Now that's going to be left margin, we're only going to go in, I don't know, 50-ish, and we're only going to go in down maybe 25. Let's see what that looks like. Not great. That lower left is getting indented, I think. No. Oh, it's not getting shoved down. That's the problem. It's still underneath something. Okay. Upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right, none. We don't have a label. We should have a label. And that will be very similar to this previous label. Do I have a previous label? Label. There we go. Oh, that's a checkbox label, of course. All right, so we're going to go ahead and local locked position label equals a turbine.ui.label. We're going to go ahead and parent that thing. Locked position, because you always want to have a parent in your UI tree. And we're just going to do the options itself. Okay, same thing. We're going to do a set position. And that's going to be the left margin, sure, and the current control top. But we want to remember to go ahead and control top equals control top plus. We're going to bump that down after the label. All right, locked position label, set width. And then, I don't know how big this thing is going to be. We'll just start with 100, see how that goes, maybe 150. And, oops, we do need a text. Okay, so locked position label, set text, and we're just going to do a get string from lang.options.lock icon location. There we go. Okay, that might be sufficient. Let's take a look at that. Okay, choose location of lock icon, not as wide as it needed to be. So let's go ahead and bump it up to 200, but it does look like this can be less than 30 pixels deeper. There we go. Choose location of lock icon. Only complaint I have is I should probably have a colon at the end of that. I wasn't sure if this was going to go before or after, above or below, but this is certainly a way to do it. And that was just too wide. Fascinating. Okay, choose location of lock icon, upper left, lower left, lower right, upper right, none. Excellent. Now, this is where having just an array of buttons and having them all have the same handler might make sense. But I think instead of having anonymous functions handling this, it might be better to go ahead and have function change lock icon location with the parameter of new location. And then we can go ahead and call that from each of these. So we have the upper left, the click. Oh, I haven't actually tested that. So we have upper left, upper right, none, lower left, lower right. Great. So instead of this debug message, we can go ahead and say change icon lock location to, I don't know, we're going to way to store this. But we'll go ahead and just say upper left, just UL, and we'll see what that looks like when the function wants to handle it. So that's going to be UR. This one will be LL. This will be LR. And finally, we'll get a none. And then change lock icon location can handle that. Okay. So, just confirming, we get UL, none, UR, LR, LL. Cool. Everything's good there. Okay, so we have a centralized function to handle the pressing of those 5 buttons. What we don't really have is what does it look like when that is pressed? So, functionally, we have 2 things. Placing the button now and keeping the button in the right location when the window is resized. For instance, if we unlock this, by moving it left, whenever the button's in the upper left or lower left, we're going to get the left alignment for free because it's always 0 pixels from the left. But if we position it at the bottom of the window now, but then make the window taller or shorter, we're going to need to deal with the vertical offset. And same thing, if it's on the right side of the window, when the width changes that way, we're going to need to pay attention to it. Actually, if the width changes either way. So we're going to need to track, and I should probably use my notes over here. Okay. So icons added, buttons added to the options screen. Need to track which mode we're in. Change the current position of the icon. And then on future resizes, take into account the current position of the icon. Or after each resize, call a function to fix the icon, the lock icon if necessary. Something like that. So that's what's in my head for that icon is once we've positioned it in the right location, each time we do a resize, we'll just, as the window gets bigger, we'll pin the lock icon in the right location. And that seems like a thing that the window needs to do, not the lock icon itself, because otherwise the lock icon would have to really dig into the internals of what's going on in the window. Okay. Well, we're rapidly approaching the end of today's time here, but I think there's been some really interesting progress, and we've seen what it looks like if we want to emulate the in-game UI for rolling over an icon, for clicking an icon, for how to drag off of the icon before you release, to drag off the button before you release, to cancel the operation. And we've seen that inside the UI, it seems like they did not implement the click UI change for the lock button. And that's very interesting. And it makes me wonder if that's true in the shop as well. Of course, I don't have anything to sell. All right, I'll split something out here. Okay, there's just no there's no feedback at all when you're over the locker if you click it in the store inventory. That's very interesting. Okay. So we've seen how to replicate that in our own plugins here. And we've synchronized the clicking of the button there with the options window. And now the only thing left is the location of that icon there. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. So while I'm grabbing a glass of water and thinking about any other notes I want to take, if you have any last minute comments or thoughts to shout out into chat there, go ahead and get those out. Oh, Exo says, granted, I could probably just make a geared class to handle it. Yeah, there's a certain compelling idea to, I have a UI problem, make a new UI class to handle it. And if your own class can handle it, then maybe it's worth the time. Maybe. All right. Well, it is the last Tuesday of the month. So once again, Shoreless Skies is going to be back with Beneath Your Feet at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, which I believe it is currently around 4, so it's about 5 hours from now. And I hear today's destination for Beneath Your Feet is Arechion. So that sounds awesome. I expect to be unconscious at the time because I am many hours ahead, but I wish Shoreless a happy delving into Arechion. Okay, well that's everything we're going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. I think this was a really neat dive into how to get our own plugins to emulate some of the in-game UIs. I do hope to see you next week, and until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.